Invariably, no matter who you are, you're faced with different choices. And what I like to think of as the existential aspect of that is, how do you regard those choices? How do you make your choices? Do you just do it randomly, just hoping for the best? Or do you have a philosophy or structure behind how you make your choices? Welcome to Season 2 of the Stories Cafe podcast, the espresso version of Stories Cafe, a brief, enriching pause for reflection on literature, cinema, archetypes, philosophy, and the art of living deliberately. I'm Annette, course creator, internationally published author, and wanderer at heart. So cozy up and let's once again step into the world of stories and the deep ways in which they can shape the lives we live. What we're going to be talking about today has to do with movies, literature, and philosophy. Several very important literary works all have to do with actually what I call, you can call it life lessons. I like to call it lifestyle philosophy because it's about how do we regard our lives philosophically. So you know that I'm an expert on stories and I love telling about stories. What we're going to be focusing on is Henry David Thoreau's Walden, where he talks about living deliberately. You know that my cafe has the subtitle The Art of Living Deliberately, and it's, I could talk about this for hours, so I should stop myself here because obviously I don't have time in the few minutes we have here to talk about everything. But just that concept that I'm sort of throwing at you, try thinking about that. The art of living deliberately. What does it mean to live deliberately? Is it different to live deliberately as opposed to living consciously or living mindfully? And the answer is yes, it actually is quite different. And one of the reasons why it is different is because of Thoreau's Walden, where he talks about specifically that he went to live in the woods to live deliberately. The second text is Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. Both those are actually about life choices, the philosophical aspects of being a human being. But what does that mean? Well, the Road Not Taken, as the title actually suggests, is about making choices. And you may know the final stanza of that poem, I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference, is that you have choices in life. Invariably, no matter who you are, you're faced with different choices. And what I like to think of as the existential aspect of that is, how do you regard those choices? How do you make your choices? Do you just do it randomly, just hoping for the best? Or do you have a philosophy or structure behind how you make your choices? And to me, those are all very fascinating aspects. And being an expert on stories, one of my personal philosophies is that the stories we loved when we were little, the stories we love now, whether that is in literature or film or Shakespeare's plays or Bob Dylan's songs or whatever it is, the stories that we love can give us very important clues to how we might philosophically and deliberately make choices instead of just, something comes along and you have to act and you have to make a choice. And you just do it at the spur of the moment. And to me, it's very important to have a philosophy behind the choices you make in one way or another. I'm not talking about a specific philosophy, just the idea that you have thoughts about, you probably heard me say this before, is what matters to you the most. And if you're grounded in what matters to you the most, it'll be much more easy for you to make choices because you will have a perspective on which to make the choices. And just the fact that no matter who we are, the basic existentialist philosophy actually is, you are the sum total of the choices you make. You are the sum total of the choices you make in life. And I always thought since I was little, a lot of the things I'm very fortunate that way. A lot of the things I'm working on now are things that I've always been fascinated by since I was really little, when I taught myself to read and all those things. And that philosophy, you are the sum total. It all has to do with the choices you make. Are they responsible in connection with the world you're living in? And that has to do, in addition to living deliberately, that has to do with being what in existentialist terms is called being authentic. It's a word that's vastly overused these days. Everybody's talking about being authentic without, it's as if it's used almost to mean that you are true to yourself, but authentic actually means something a lot deeper than that, in philosophical terms. The third thing that I wanted to talk to you about briefly, and again, I'm throwing things at you, and I hope that you will want to think about some of these things in more detail for yourself. Because there are no right or wrong answers, but I just think it really is important that we stop and think about it. One of the periods in American history that I've always been fascinated by is the McCarthy period. I don't know if you know about this, but where people were asked to name names of their friends and family members in front of a Senate subcommittee. And to me, that's always really fascinating. Do we know, if we were asked to do that, what we would do if we were under pressure and with the threat of either being unemployed and not being able to feed our children, or of being out of work, or of actually maybe going to jail for contempt of court? Do we know what we would do? Would we actually name those names, or would we have a strategy? So again, I love talking about all these things because I think it is so important. But the final thing, before I interrupted myself, the final thing I wanted to talk to you about is, are you good at receiving and enjoying the rewards and pleasures in life? Or are you better at giving and nurturing others? Because very often, I mean, you hear about how Indiana Jones goes through all these vehicles to get the whatever it is, Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, but you never hear that he sat down and took a long hot shower and enjoyed himself and felt proud of himself. But the thing is, and that's another philosophical and actually scientific fact, is that one of the most important things for life to exist is circulation. If you have stagnant water in a pond or in a puddle, it will get sort of infected and muddy and very disgusting. That if you don't have circulation, you can't have life. You need to have blood circulation. And you need to have circulation in general. And if you think about that in terms of how we live our lives, again, that we have to be able to give and we have to be able to receive. If we can't do both, if you only receive and don't give, you will eventually get obese and die from overweight. If you only give and never receive, you will eventually die of exhaustion. You will be drained. So that's the reason why I asked that question, and that is, for me, is worth thinking about. If you want to live your best life, you know that I have a challenge, which is all about how can you create the best life for yourself where you are both the author of your life and the main character in your life. You need to be able to give and go out and do for others and be in the world. But sometimes you have to actually be able to receive. I'm sorry, I'm throwing a lot at you today. I hope you want to sit down quietly and think about some of these things. They may not all resonate equally with you, but you know that I also, in terms of the cafe and the way I live my life, talk about seasonal living, because seasonal living has to do with when do you give during the year and when do you receive. You obviously have to do both all the time, but when do you focus more on one than the other? So that was it may seem like a lot of different things today, but actually it all has to do with what I call the art of living deliberately. And again, the headline, if you have the text Walden by Thoreau and The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost, and then you have the philosophy that those poems are about. Thank you so much for joining me. If this episode added value to your day, you're always welcome to return. You can follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts so that each new episode lands directly in your podcast app. And if you feel like leaving a review, it helps others to find their way here too. If you'd like to go deeper, you're warmly welcome inside Stories Cafe. Just go to stories-cafe.com, where you'll find further reflections, conversations, and a growing library of ideas. I'm looking forward to welcoming you back next time.